Well, good morning and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith and it's a joy to welcome you today to this church administration, church management podcast. We love talking about the work of ministry behind the scenes. And today we've got loads of special guests. We're doing a slightly different podcast. We've got 5 different guests today who are all talking about our previous podcast with Terry Virgo. We loved sitting down with Terry Virgo and gaining a pastor's perspective on complementary gifts, on his working relationship with Nigel and how the two of them work together in New Frontiers. Loads and loads of really, really good and helpful stuff. So we thought it'd be great to hear from 5 of our listeners. What did you get out of the session with Terry Virgo? What did you enjoy? What were you inspired to do differently in your work? So we've got 5 guests. Our first guest is Tim Wyatt, the best accountant, charity accountant in the UK. Let me tell you, he's a great guy who loves the gospel and is part of a church up in Leeds. So let's listen to Tim as he shares his feedback. Welcome, Tim Wyatt, mate. How are you doing?
Oh, it's good to be back on. I always enjoy it. It's great to chat to you. I mean, yeah, we're doing well, and enjoyed listening to your fantastic interview with Mr. Terry Virgo. It looked like you had a great road trip down to Brighton. If I'm honest, I really enjoyed your pre-podcast of you're in the car, in the car reflections. Thought we've got getting a live taste of what the church office feels like when it's on the road.
It was fun.
It was great. So yeah,
it was a real privilege to go and sit in his house, meet his wife. We had lunch all together, and then we were just chatting loads. And then we put him in front of the camera and said, talk to us about complementary gifts and Nigel and working with it. Mate, it's gold, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And to have that opportunity to hear all of that, all those reflections on what has been, a phenomenal, whether you use the word career is probably wrong, but legacy and journey of what New Frontiers has grown from to become is fascinating. And to hear how the administration of that is all interwoven so importantly with the vision and the passion and the prayer of where God was leading him and this movement. So really fascinating. And I've come away with a number of reflections that have taken away. Even Tim the accountant's got some reflections.
My favorite Yorkshire accountant. He's an absolute legend. So what stuck out to you then, my friend? What did you come away with and gone, oh, I love that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big themes I really enjoyed was hear him talk in a great, honest way about team, and how he articulated that. And it was great also to hear his dynamic friendship and working relationship with Nigel, and just hear how just some great examples of how vision and passion and prayer of somebody of his nature, of those that classic pastor whom probably many of the people in the podcast relate to in their day-to-day job, meets the administration and someone in Nigel who's just got such a passion to I see and hear your vision. Let's work out the roadmap and all those things that need to take place to work out. So team was just a great theme that came through for me, and one of the things I was reflecting on was a few of the themes that he was talking around creating a really good team culture, and how in my reflection that just some of the how you make that happen, how you lead that with vulnerability, and how you get to that point. So that was one of the things that really struck me. If you can create that culture in your team where in real honesty and love things can be said, and there is that culture there, it just it has the ability to bless everybody there and the overall big picture that you're working towards. So I think it was a really interesting point that I have pondered on, of how you then can help that be the case, of how you give such a free, you give that freedom. And I know one of the things he was sharing, which I think is quite an interesting cultural moment as well, that he's reflecting on about investing in friendship in team, and giving time to letting those friendships build. And I know post COVID culture in in online world. And it's one of the things, kind of the meetings I have with various of the people. There still a lot of them are quite online, even though we've got the option to meet in person. It's just convenient and quick. And one of my reflections was, there's sometimes actually where it's good to be convenient and quick, to have a quick meeting. It's not taking everyone's time, but is there a balance to find in actually the trying to invest in friendships? I know something we were saying just before the podcast started of, wow, this term is busy. It is busy. And how do you get that balance of, right, no, this is friendship investment meal time versus we've got X, Y, and Z to do for Christmas.
We know we've got a list and it's growing. It's really good. And finance popped up, didn't it, when they were talking about church planting? And one of the things I noticed as he was talking is there was this sense of like coming together, but there was this sharing of resources. So they didn't want a central hub that ran everything, but this idea of a task force on the move. Different churches took different responsibility for different things, and I loved a little bit of insight about how they did their church planting side of things, and Nigel would interview and how they would work the budgets out and that kind of 2-3 year plan of funding. It was really interesting to kind of just hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was fascinating to hear the kind of the ins and outs. It's something I'd not specifically heard about from the New Frontiers model, although I'm aware of how lots of other kind of spheres have navigated their church planning. But that it's a brilliant macro large structure that makes sure everyone's got the support they need, but also the ability to float, I know is the words he was using, without the pressure of, if you don't, you're sinking on your own. We're still here. Really interesting. And I can only imagine, I know it's fascinating to hear the high level talk about it, but I'm sure from the work I do, the practicalities of making that happen will have been, there's a huge amount of work that's gone into that. There's a huge amount of skill set that's gone into that. That I can only imagine is a testament to them and how they've managed to do that. But it's a great model. Sounds like
And one of the takeaways with that was just this lovely reminder that actually church administrators and those working behind the scenes and the work that you do all links in here, because there's a huge role in church planting and taking the gospel out that the ministry behind the scenes enables to happen. And I was just blessed by that, thinking actually church plants need a visionary leader. Yes, they do. They need a church planting team, but unless they've got some admin and ops support, it doesn't always go forward. And there was this lovely kind of sense of actually there's a real strength and a role for us to play in church planting that I hadn't even necessarily realized, to the full extent of when you're saying, right, well, Nigel did this and Nigel did that and he sorted out this, and you're like, oh, actually Nigel's done quite a lot here. Terry, what did you actually do here with this church plant?
Absolutely. And one of the reflections I had on that is the challenge I had is thinking, there are lots of visions and lots of ideas and lots of creative thought process, which probably takes place a huge amount in our collective churches. And I'm sure there are a number of those which are, I'm sure a lot that are amazing, but how many of them do get to the point of fruition? Because actually of all those foundational blocks of administration, process, strategy, and all those things that they've got to come together to make it happen. And you're absolutely right. I think it's a brilliant encouragement that you have someone of significant position in leadership who's has a legacy about what they started, really praising and honoring those people who actually have really laid those foundations to make that happen. And it's a great encouragement, and I certainly came away encouraged knowing that the late night finance meetings with trustee boards and churches they're worth it. They're there for a reason, and even though they're not the glamorous side of things, absolutely they are pivotal in making and driving forward what the vision is, and ultimately the gospel being shared and his light brought. So really encouraging. I came away encouraged.
Mate, love that. Brilliant. Tim, it's great to chat to you, bud. Thank you so much for your thoughts and reflections. And let's get you back on the podcast sometime soon. We love you, mate.
Always big fan of the pod. We do a great job, Gav. And yeah, anytime anyone's happy to listen to my Yorkshire tones, always happy to be back on.
Good man. All right, we'll see you soon, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Our second guest is Anna Wood. Looking forward to hearing your reflections from the last podcast with Terry Virgo. So yeah, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
It's
great
good
to be here.
How is Liverpool?
Liverpool today is actually really bright and sunny. Yeah, it's quite pleasant today. Cold. It's definitely October now. The proper weather has started, but no, Liverpool's going well. Yeah, good.
We've already had a few debates on when the heating should go on in the church. Have you started that yet?
We had to start yesterday, so it started, and yeah,
and it's on.
It's on, and I'm just really looking forward to having the bills coming in. It's just
terrifying.
Such a delight.
Yeah,
it's a bit terrifying.
One of the things we're balancing. So tell me, what did you get out of that podcast?
Well, before I sort of start my proper reflection, one thing I should mention is, given that you've mentioned that I'm up here in Liverpool, is I did enjoy the fact that he was inspired by Liverpool football team.
Yes,
and part of his planning in terms of how to recruit leaders into the church. As much as I'm not a particularly passionate football fan, I think it would be wrong of me to not even mention that, given that I'm up here.
Made that connection when we logging on talking. Yeah, you're in Liverpool. He talks about it, doesn't he? Having kind of teaching people through the academy, but then also buying in people. And God spoke to him through Liverpool Football Club. Amazing.
I know. I mean, who would have thought? But
and you've got red on today.
Work in mysterious ways. That wasn't planned, but yes, I do feel like I'm now really,
You've really represented it well.
My boss will be proud. So yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, no, it was a really helpful podcast. I did really enjoy listening to it. And there were lots of bits in there that were just really helpful to listen to and to mull over. But I was particularly struck by some of what he said about the importance of character, and that also linking in my head anyway with the importance of creating those strong relational connections between people that you're working with, and making sure that those characters are godly, but also characters which are going to complement each other and work together well. I was just, kind of reflecting on that, thinking, well, actually, if you've got two characters which may be both godly, but perhaps not sort of complementary in terms of how they function or how they think, or then that's going to cause a bit of a difficult working relationship. So actually, that character aspect, from a biblical point of view, is obviously critically important, but also just more broadly as well in terms of that working, functioning effectiveness on a day-to-day basis. But that was really helpful to think over.
Yeah, it's useful, isn't it? Because we can only think that character applies to elders, but when we look at qualifications for deacons and many of the roles, the church officer roles or the admin roles, do fit into that kind of deacon role. That character is absolutely essential.
It is, yeah, and I think actually, even if we're not trying to pursue somebody to fill an office of deacon or elder, actually looking for those character traits in people is still a really helpful process to go through, because they may not ever hold those offices, but they can still represent aspects of those character traits which are gifted by God and guided by God and used hopefully for God in that role then as a result.
I loved it. I thought it was clever to think about it, because as we think about it, I can often go towards performance or ability or skill or something like that straight away, but but actually pausing and going, okay, where have we got character? Because we can learn skill and we can learn different types of, gifting and different roles in the church, but actually the character thing, it takes time and maturity, and it's such an important aspect of it. So if you choose people of good character, they may not get the job done as well as you think or you need, but actually the way they get it done will be the thing that makes it distinctive. And I like that.
Yeah, and I think that heart desire as well as part of that is integral to it. So it might not be necessarily as quick or as efficient as it could be if you perhaps had someone that was more experienced in that area. But like you say, you can train somebody up, and you're more likely to be able to train somebody up who has got a character that is willing to serve and desiring to serve the church and serve the Lord through that, because that's going to motivate them to actually pick up those skills, to listen and to be teachable. That's part of that character you're trying to look for, isn't it? So they may not start off being the most proficient in everything that we need, but the hope and the prayer would be that actually that's going to come over time in a way which is so encapsulated in God's teachings and in God's character reflected in us. So hopefully that would be a real positive in the longer term.
Yeah, I love that. And there was just some lovely dynamics, wasn't there, that you kept talking about in terms of a relational focus rather than anything else, just spending time together, not just over the agenda, but over caring for one another, relating to one another, eating together, praying together. It was inspiring.
I love having a good meal, and so that bit did strike me. But it is important, being able to say, spend time with one another and just chatting and just checking in on how things are going, and not necessarily being best friends. I mean, you might end up being best friends with people you're working with, and that's wonderful. But it's not necessarily about reaching that level of friendship, but it is about having that relational dynamic, which is more than just work-based, get the job done, go home. If we can care for one another and learn about one another in a way which is a deeper relationship than just perhaps a standard work relationship would be, then that hopefully will bring benefits to both parties at some point in the future when things are joyful, but also when things perhaps are a bit trickier. Hopefully it makes just for a generally more positive, effective working relationship as well, just day to day.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it, in the interview to like how Terry just honors Nigel and some of the other staff that he's working with, to have someone that's such a, who's been around for such a long time, and like you say, has done an amazing job, has valued the diversity of gifting, and has always sought to kind of recruit them and bring them onto the team or bring them into roles. It was kind of lovely that he recognizes it and sees it and the importance of it.
Yeah, I was really struck actually in that by how humble he came across, in the sense that it was evident that he hadn't wanted and hadn't been motivated by making it all about his success in the role that he was fulfilling and the work that he was doing. He wanted to bring other people, he wanted to spot other people and their giftings and their character and bring them to undertake the Lord's work, and to give them that space and give them that opportunity, which is wonderful, really. Because otherwise they may not have done. If someone doesn't spot that in you, doesn't kind of identify that potential, then it'd be a shame to waste that opportunity.
Yeah, love that. Well, Anna, thanks for sharing a couple of reflections. I love it. Yeah, short and sharp. Yeah, looking forward to hearing from the others. And thanks for your time.
Yeah, me too.
We'll see you again soon on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's great. Speak to you soon. Take care.
Will do. Bye.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My third guest today, which I'm really excited about, is Bridget Jones from King's Lynn. How are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Hello, Gavin. Yeah, it's lovely to be on here. Yeah, real privilege to share in this podcast today with you guys. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely. And what Bridget has been such an encourager of the church office, and yeah, sending in messages or emails, just, thanking us and encouraging us. And it's lovely to get you on. And you've been a church administrator for 20 odd years, I guess.
Yeah, it's about 20 years. Like I say, my daughter is 23 now, and I've been working for the church for all that time. So yeah, I've got a few years experience of working in church administration. So
in this unusual world of church administration.
It certainly is. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I say to people, it's very different to a secular job because it's your work, it's your life, it's your everything kind of thing.
Yeah. It absolutely is that. I've asked Bridget to kind of just share a little bit about what she got out of the podcast with Terry Virgo, and we've had a number of people just sharing their views. So I absolutely wanted to get her on the podcast today. So, firstly, thanks for listening to Terry's podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about it, how you connected to the church office, and tell us a bit about this podcast.
Yeah, well, I came across the church office website really when we were looking to instigate Church Suite, and so I came via it that way, by the podcast that you did with the Church Suite guys, which was excellent. And so I've been an avid listener and to the podcast ever since then, really, and you cover a whole host of really helpful things if you're working in the world of church admin. But I was particularly excited when you had your road trip down to Brighton.
Yeah,
you were going to interview Terry Virgo, mainly really because I think Terry and his team really stood the test of time ministry wise, and so I was really looking forward for him to share his wisdom, and when you look at what Terry and his team have built. I thought this is going to be well worth listening and learning from somebody who's further down the road than we are.
Yeah.
And when you see what he's done, I thought, this is going to be really good. Really looking forward to hear what Terry Virgo's got to say to us. Yeah,
he's a remarkable man, isn't he? And built a fantastic ministry, but immediately he comes across really humble, doesn't he, in the conversation?
Exactly. Yes, that's right. And I think that his humility actually comes across in so many different ways, and actually works, seems to work down his team as well. So So
tell us some of the standout points then, that what you really enjoyed. What stood out?
Well, what I really enjoyed was, to be honest, I've listened to the podcast that you guys did with Nigel Ring, which was, of course, was Terry Virgo's administrator. And they were really helpful as well. And what I loved about that was that Nigel had said, he said, Terry has the vision and we make it happen.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. And actually that came out again when you spoke with Terry Virgo, because, he was very keen to not separate his admin staff from his ministry staff. And, he was talking about them being involved in the prayer meetings and being involved in the planning meetings, and so it wasn't like that the admin staff were somewhere separate, just doing admin work, but actually they were involved in sharing in the vision. And I thought that was really important, because sometimes an admin staff, we can feel like we're just doing the boring stuff that and the spiritual side of church is the exciting bit, but actually what I think Terry Virgo and Nigel Ring have managed to do is actually marry those two things together. Absolutely. Which I think has been a real strength, and that came through on what Terry was saying.
Yeah, that was lovely. There was a real kind of honouring, wasn't there, from Terry?
Absolutely.
For that gift.
Which is lovely actually to see. One of the things that Terry said later in the podcast was that it's not all about his ideas. He said it's not like it's only valid if I said it. And I think that is extremely important, because it must make his team feel really part of what's going on. And that really struck me when he said, it's not only my ideas, but it's everybody has a voice around the table. Which is really great.
He did did do that really well, didn't he? And I think he said in the podcast, didn't he, that it wasn't like we came out of a meeting and then gave Nigel a big list of things to say, right, off you go and do this.
That's right. Yes,
but he was in the meeting and he captured the heart of what they were doing. And exactly. I love that. And I think where administrators are involved in that process, it does seem to be real fruit and connection that happens.
It does. And I think actually it brings a real strength to church, when you can have team effort. I know Terry talked about building team. That was another thing he said. And I thought it was interesting actually when he said, team is actually never mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
It made me smile because, Terry Virgo is a man of the word of God.
Yeah.
Which, really comes out in everything he says as well, which is paramount importance and, really important. But he equally said, he says, I've really enjoyed leading teams.
Yeah.
And I loved how he says everybody has an opportunity to share in the room.
Yeah.
If they don't share in the room, he says it gets talked about in the corridor.
Yeah.
And that is so true. And I think if we're honest, we've all been in those meetings where maybe something hasn't been able to be shared in the room. And so it's been shared in the corridor.
Yeah, and how damaging that can be, can't it? Exactly. Yeah, we've all experienced things like that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
there's huge wisdom there, isn't there? Yeah.
Oh yes, 100%. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think all of those like very practical things that Terry brought out were just really helpful to hear. And because you can go along in life and almost forget some of those very basic things, but really important things that to be listened to is actually quite a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like I say, I love that he was open to other people's ideas, because sometimes I think even as the church leader, you can feel like you've got to bring everything.
Yeah.
But actually there's a strength in, each person bringing their own gifting, and bringing what they have to offer. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was good. He did seem to allow people space, didn't he, to bring their gifting, and I think that was a really good sense of really good leadership somehow.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Just saying, you're the evangelist. Bring some thought into this. You're the administrator.
That's right. Yeah, and I loved actually how he said that. His guy that had a particularly evangelistic gifting.
Yeah.
Said we'd be in meetings but the evangelist would say, what about the lost, and I think that's true because we all have our own ministry gifts that are paramount importance in our own minds, but actually when the whole thing comes together, you get the whole package, which is got to be a strength, hasn't it? Really,
it is. I really enjoyed that as well. What about the lost and how if it was just left to me to administrate, the church would look quite different. But actually when we've got different gifts involved, it does get messy and there are different priorities and actually this is really good. And but there was a real quality about the leadership of Terry.
There is. I
thoroughly enjoyed listening to that.
And I think, I think really you can see it, when you look at the New Frontiers model of churches, I think you can see, that he's built something that's really strong and, and good. Actually, it's interesting that we're talking about gifting, because one of the things he said, which I thought was really important, was when he said character is more important than gifting. And I think that's really valuable, because I think you can have the most gifted people in any area of church life, whether it's admin, children's ministry or worship or whatever it is. You can have the most gifted person in the world, but actually if there's a deficiency in their character, that will play out in whatever they do. And it's easy to think, oh yes, the person's very gifted, let's use them, but actually if their character isn't quite there, that is going to be something that's going to come to the fore.
He did say that, didn't he? He said, giftedness makes things happen, but without character, it's going to go wrong, and it can go wrong badly, can't it, as well, with these things?
That's right.
Yeah, it was interesting because I chatted to Anna Wood, who's an administrator in Liverpool, and she brought out the same thing.
Right, yeah.
Character really impacts their saying.
Oh, it does.
When I'm looking to recruit people, actually stopping for a minute and thinking, we can teach people skills and process, but actually character, you can't do that. So
no, that's right. Yeah. So and I just think that I was really impressed with the way he talked about relationship. He was saying, when we got our elders together, we have a meal together, we become friends. But and it's relationship before business. And I think that's another really important thing that actually in church life, it's much more about relationship than it is business. So that was great.
That's great, and it's such a helpful reminder, isn't it? Because I was in an elders meeting the other night, and there was this eagerness to get to the agenda because we've got a church meeting coming, and I'm thinking, right, we need to talk about these things and pin this down. But actually, just I could hear Terry reminding me saying, actually, no, this is about relationship. And I was thinking, okay, let me put the brakes on this a little bit and go.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's how's everyone doing, and let's pray together.
And
let's pray for what's
happening.
It's
so true, because I think when we're both involved in church admin, and sometimes it can be so tempting to just get no, we need to have this conversation. This needs to happen. We need to get going. But actually, you're right. You do need to put the brakes on and think actually what's important.
What's the most important? It's so much. Well, you've picked out some brilliant points, and thank you for taking the time to share them on the podcast.
That's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
We'll definitely get you back on again. This is not just your debut. You've got such great wisdom, and there's just a lovely grace about you, Bridget. I'm sure your church benefits hugely from you being involved. So
we trust it does.
Well, it's lovely to see you, and we look forward to interviewing our next guest as we talk about Terry Virgo's podcast.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gavin, for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
All right, well, my next special guest is Jonathan Thomas, the legend Jonathan Thomas. A great pastor's perspective now on this podcast, mate. We've enjoyed listening to administrators, but it's great to have a pastor's view. So, mate, fill us in on what you enjoyed about the interview with Terry Virgo.
I really enjoyed it. I've kind of read quite a few Terry Virgo books, listened to his sermons over the years, and like many others, I think his sermons on Romans that he did, are life-changing. So it was wonderful to hear him, particularly as an older guy, kind of reflecting back. So there's a point in the podcast where he paused and he kind of went, hold on, let me think now. I don't want to just talk theoretical. I want to tell you what actually happened. And I love that kind of, he wanted to share the truth, and it came from years of experience and wisdom. So I really enjoyed the tone of it. It was so warm and helpful.
He was so easy, wasn't he, to listen to? And you're right. Just, what him and Nigel together have done, and I know that team is wider than just the two of them, but this kind of honoring and appreciation of the different gifts, that kind of very visionary, big ideas, big picture that Terry has, to the detail and the administration that Nigel had. It's fascinating, isn't it, to see such a big movement, New Frontiers, behind the scenes, kind of peel it back and go, that's interesting to the things that they value and they love.
And I think what I loved about that relationship between them is I think sometimes there's a perception that you've kind of got the visionary leaders, and then the backroom guys are kind of like slowing the visionary leaders down. And so that story he tells about when, he comes into the office one day and there's a brochure for the 5,000-seater auditorium. And he's like, why is that here? And he's like, well, you prayed about it, so let's have a look at it. And I thought, that is like superb, True church administration, kind of administry, is not holding back, but it's like helping the vision go forward. And so I love that kind of partnership and how it worked.
That was sweet, wasn't it? And I just love the fact that he's in the room with the team and he's praying. He's not just giving a list of things, go away and do this, but Nigel somehow captured the heartbeat of it, and you could see that Terry there was just this trust and this confidence to go, yeah, he's got this part sorted and I don't need to think about it, which must be nice for a pastor to have that kind of relationship.
Yeah, and it was interesting, I think, listening to it and reflecting, we're new as a church, we, in the sense of you came in and you kind of advised us and helped us, and we ended up employing a church administrator, which has been and such a game changer for me and the church. It's been wonderful. But actually listening to the podcast made me think, okay, actually we sit down and discuss things, but actually should our church administrator be in more meetings to get a sense of what's being discussed and to catch that vision? And so that's really challenged me, and I need to think that through, really. I think there was a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And there's so you just picked up this lovely culture of teams, didn't you? And the senior leader of Terry being able to give room to like the complementary gifts, and when he talks about the evangelist guy, what about the lost? I loved it. I just think, you've got to be a particular kind of leader to allow that kind of diversity to happen. Because I think challenge, do you think, for some pastors?
Not for me, because I'm not a micromanaging megalomaniac. Although I think if you talk to my elders in the church, they might have a different view. That is the temptation, particularly for, I'm a small church pastor, and in a kind of smaller church, the danger is you kind of become Papa Church. And so as a kind of the pastor, you want to be involved in everything. And the problem is then you end up dominating everything. And I guess the church can grow wonkily around your weaknesses, or sometimes accentuate your weaknesses. So what I loved about this was you just get a team and being willing. I mean, the way he talks about handing things over to people and, them taking on that. I think that's the big challenge that kind of I've been kind of on a journey on over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, is finding the people and not delegating in the sense of, I just can't be bothered to do this, I need someone to do it. But empowering, so finding someone who God has gifted and who love these things, and actually empowering them to do it within the team, within the kind of leadership of the church, so that actually they flourish and the church flourishes. So I loved the way that came out. And I guess you can see, I remember the kind of, the Bible weeks. I never went, but I heard about Stoneleigh and these things, and they were huge.
30,000 at some point. I
mean, they must have been massive kind of organizational teams going on. Interestingly, in one of the other Christchurch podcasts, when as a church you interviewed Joel, his son. And he goes on about kind of New Day in the youth conference. It's interesting that the part of that story, I think, was basically you had all these people who'd been able to do Stoneleigh, and then they stopped it, and they were like, well, we love doing this. And kind of Joel gets them together, and they're like, well, let's do New Day. And I love the idea that in the church, it's 1 Corinthians, isn't it? Where Paul says, the Holy Spirit gives gifts as he determines for the common good. And you think within the church, there are these people who God has gifted. And actually, if you get the right people on the right seats in the bus, it's the journey is so much better.
So much smoother. It's right. And I guess for pastors, do you find it difficult to identify people with those gifts in the church and sort of recruit them in? And is that something you've found a challenge over the years?
Yeah, sometimes it can be. I think, particularly in kind of, and this is probably true in larger churches, but in smaller churches, everybody tends to volunteer, so everybody's involved. So sometimes you have a need, and you're looking at the kind of members list, and you're going, well, they do this, this, and that, and they do this, and that, and you kind of feel guilty about asking them to do something else. But what I've kind of seen over the last 5 years in 3 key appointments that we needed to make as a church, so church administrator, families worker, someone to help us with outreach, like we advertised far and wide, looking outside, because that was the only way we could think of doing it. And all 3 appointments have been church members.
Is that right?
So it's like they were there all along. And so yeah, so
that's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been.
And
brilliant.
would they have been people that you would have gone? You might have been embarrassed to ask or to choose, or you weren't sure if they'd give up their work to go and do this in the church.
Yeah, and that's been the thing. I think is often you just think, man, these people are brilliant, but they're so busy.
Yeah.
Or they're just not in the right stage of life, or the right season of life. And actually, when the kind of call has gone out, they've answered, and they've answered sacrificially, and it's been really humbling to see that, and really encouraging.
Yeah, it's good. So it sounds like you're developing a sort of part-time staff, and you've got a team now. So any takeaways from, like, how am I going to lead this team differently from what you've heard on the podcast?
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is, because we've got a part-time team, so everybody is part-time, and it's quite funny. You look down sometimes at our hours, and none of us work the same hours. So you can't get the team together because hours are limited. And I wonder, before listening to the podcast and reflecting, I wonder whether I was maybe a little bit too happy with that, just going, well, that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. But actually, I think realizing, no, actually, we need to fight to get that time to come together, to pray together, so that everybody gets the bigger picture, and that we're all on that together. So, that definitely came out to me.
Mate, love that. Mate, thank you so much for taking the time on a Monday to chat to us, mate. I know you're busy. And
but
mate,
thanks
we love
so much.
having you on the podcast.
Hey, always good.
It's great. Lovely. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, God bless.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office podcast. I've got my favourite Penny Clark on the podcast, number 5, telling us about what she loved about the Terry Virgo interview. Penny, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Great to be with you. These are definitely not my books on the bookshelf behind. I'm in one of the pastor's offices, so clearly he's far more well-read than I am. Mine are all about money management and stewardship. These seem to be about books of the Bible.
Yeah, man. So you snuck in his office where it's warm, I hear.
I have. It's warmer than mine. Yeah, I've not had the heating on. He has. Good stewardship, that.
Every church is having this debate at the minute. I was saying to somebody else, when do you put the heating on? When do you not? And particularly when prices are so high. It's a careful decision here.
Yes. Well, if you're going to use your room all day, you can have your heating on. If you're going in and out, put a cardigan on. We actually are keeping Marks and Spencer's thermal underwear department in business, I think. By thermal underwear, I just mean t-shirts. No more information.
So Penny, fill me in. What did you love about this little interview? What stuck out?
So I've heard interviews with Nigel Ring before, but I've never heard you interview with Terry Virgo. What a gorgeous, gorgeous man. I really loved his humility, just the way he would speak about other people, speak about his team, speak about his administrator, and just know that it's God's work that is being done here, and the way that he speaks so graciously towards the other people around him who have the skills that he doesn't have. Just that whole, body of Christ idea that we all have a different part to play, and no one's better than the rest. I just love listening to him talking like that, particularly when he was talking about how Nigel would sit in asked to sit in a prayer meeting so that he could just hear the heart of what Terry was talking to God about, and then think, right, okay, heard what the vision is. How can I serve to enable that to happen? And I use the expression, he was the person who made it happen. And I know it wasn't an interview just to sort of big up an administrator, but it was great to hear that dynamic and listen to the dynamic between the two of them. One has the vision, the other makes it happen, but neither was better.
Yeah, that was lovely, wasn't it? There was a lovely respect between the two of them. And we'd obviously heard Nigel before on the podcast talking about his relationship with Terry, and it was lovely that so much of that married up. And the example about hearing Terry pray about the Brighton Centre, and then him going and starting to do the work on it was just like, oh, that is really cool. And there was this lovely relationship between them, wasn't there? Terry was able to gather people around him really well.
Yeah, I also love that he commented on the different viewpoint or the different perspective that perhaps Nigel would have, that he acknowledged that wasn't his viewpoint, but that other viewpoint gave an indicator or gave some more practical ideas. One of the things we have in our team is bring an ops person into the meeting, You know, when you're having a planning meeting about a church event or some mission outreach or something, bring an ops person in, because they will see things from a different perspective and add so much, but also stop the grief of, well, you can't do that because the risk assessment says no. You know, it's that thinking in a different constructive way of still helping to make the vision happen, but actually saving all the thinking time or all the grief of pursuing a pathway that then doesn't happen. So that was clearly a great dynamic between the two of them.
It's good, isn't it? If ministers or lead pastors see administration as a kind of necessary evil, then they've got the perspective totally wrong. And to see it as wanting to get behind a vision, to build a vision, to support a vision. Terry got that, didn't he? And he got that and was able to kind of release, you know, not just the tasks, but the kind of responsibility and authority to Nigel. So Nigel was making decisions that were really decisions that mattered. And you see Terry being okay with that. And it was good to see that. And I think your point in here, if you're a pastor listening to this, getting somebody in operations in a meeting, not just to hear you pray, but to give a perspective on how you might plan something going forward, could really serve you in a huge way. And we've certainly seen that in our experience, Penny, haven't we, with churches working well, with these two roles working together well in churches. It does make a huge difference, and we'd be huge advocates for that in the role, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I remember hearing or sitting in a workshop, 7-8 years ago, where Jules Morgan, you know Jules, was talking with her pastor. They came and did a bit of a in the Days Before podcast, a bit of a talk to the audience, and they were talking about how the relationship worked and how it was so important to have that mutual respect. Different roles, different responsibilities, different vision, different way of working, but to work together, you know, and build that mutual relationship and respect for each other is so important. Co-workers.
I love that. And there was some great, and you know what has been a very successful ministry, isn't it, with, you know, over 700-800 churches across the world that they've supported, planted churches, trained people, done work in very complicated and difficult countries. It's remarkable, and to see the team of gifts which he was able to draw in to build that was, it's quite spectacular, really. But at the same time, he's such a humble man, and knowing that God's opened doors, he says, God opened this door.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just loved it when he was talking about when they were doing church planting. You just alluded to it there when you made that last comment about how he'd have the vision for where I want the church planted, and not where I want it planted, but where I believe the church should be planted. And then almost like Nigel would come up behind, do the budgeting, do the structure, work out how it was going to happen. And it was just that brilliant working relationship of we each do our own bit, but it works.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And someone at that kind of experience to be promoting that diversity, working together, that gift of administration. Thank you, Terry, for taking the time to do that, because I think there are lots of church administrators going, yay, this is great, and I want to hear it, and pastors, I think, who come back to me, you know, through listening to the podcast going, I think I need to be different. I need to consider how I can draw people in. And Jonathan Thomas shared a little bit about that on the podcast, and hopefully that does challenge some thinking out there.
Well, when it works well, it can be really, really powerful, can't it?
Yeah. I love it. Penny, thanks for taking the time to chat to us. We love having you on the podcast. Beaming and smile, full of life and passion. And we love having you. So we'll see you again soon.
Fab, until next time.
Take care. Bye.
See you.
Well, that ends our podcast. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you so much for my 5 guests for their reflections on the Terry Virgo interview. It's been a joy to hear just how that has landed, how that has made an impact from both administrators, from both pastors, from people who are carrying big responsibility in management, and those who are working part-time in their churches. There's just a whole range of people on today. So big thank you to my guests, and please check out our website, check out our documents, check out our previous podcasts. If there's anything that we can do as a church office to serve you and encourage you in your role, then we'd love to hear from you. If this podcast has made a difference, then we'd love you to complete a short review and email in to tell us the difference this has made. We'd love to hear from you. All right, until next time, goodbye.